Hey guys, how's it going? And today I'm bringing you a list of what I see as not quite the best, but the most productive ships in the Season 5 of ranked gameplay in World of Warships. This season we have a two-tier spread. We have Tier 6, I do believe it's below rank 15, and above rank 15 we have Tier 8. So I wanted to go through each class and pick out what I thought was the most productive or the best ship for that class in that tier, and explain why I think that and why you would probably prefer to play that in order to gain rank. Now I'm going to start with Tier 6, and I'm going to start with the battleships as I think that's the most comprehensive, or I wouldn't say comprehensive, but I think it's the most diverse class at that tier, where it has a lot of ships to choose from and a lot of different playstyles. To start off with, I wanted to say for newer players, I'm thinking that the Arizona class or the New Mexico would probably be the better choice. They both have decent armor that can bounce or tank shots at very large angles, in my opinion, and they have a decent amount, or they have decent guns, and 12 of them. So they're very, I want to say, simple to use. Their anti-aircraft's pretty decent. All in all, they're like a medium playing field for ships. They have average speed for the tier and all the other stuff that makes them fairly decent ships. Now, if you're not so new to the battleship style of gameplay or ranked itself, I'd actually should suggest the Dunkirk or the Warspite. They're both great when they're angled, but they're really weak if they're caught out of position. Their broadside armor is very weak, especially on the Dunkirk, as it's really long, it's really flat. And they have really good guns, but they both come with their limits. The Dunkirks aren't that big, so they don't do that much damage. The Warspite doesn't have as many guns as the other ships at its tier, but it also is it's also very short ranged, but it's a very stealthy battleship, and both of them do very well when they're tanking from the front. And I just called out 4 of the 6 ships that you can play at Tier 6. Now, why didn't I mention the Fuso or the Bayern? Well, both of them I still consider as really good ships. The Fuso is a monster at the tier in random games, but in order to make use of the Fuso's guns, you have to turn almost broadside in order to use all 12 of them, which I see as a major fault in the ship and could open you up to taking a lot of damaging hits in ranked gameplay, as people will focus you as soon as you go broadside. As for the Bayern, it has fairly light shells that don't like to penetrate other battleships, and when a lot of times in the queue all you see is battleships and destroyers and very few cruisers who don't show their broadside a lot, you really want that penetration on your main guns, and that's not provided by the very light shells that the Bayern has. Not that they're bad ships, they just don't seem that great for me in that aspect. So that would be my choices for the Tier 6 battleships. Moving on to the Tier 6 cruisers, surprisingly, I'd actually choose the Molotov. This is a ship that I don't own, but I see it a lot in ranked, and when it's not tanking hits directly, it's an amazing ship. It can output a ton of damage with the Tier 9 guns that it has, and it's great for lighting battleships on fire. It's great for shooting destroyers and doing massive amounts of damage. It's very flexible. It has torpedoes that it can use on battleships if they get too close. I do believe it can have anti-aircraft defensive fire and stuff like that can provide an all-around good defensive ship for your team, along with the offensive capabilities of the 190mm guns. The only downside to it is that it's very weak armored, and I do believe it can be spotted a lot further out than other cruisers. In case you don't want to buy a premium, I'd actually suggest the Cleveland or the Boutonniere. Both of them are very good ships for the same reasons. They have high rates of fire, they're very good fire starters, and both of them have their own uniqueness, I guess you could say. The Cleveland has very good anti-aircraft. Boutonniere has sonar, I do believe. I don't think it has radar at that tier. I do believe that starts at Tier 8. But that's what I choose for the Tier 6 cruisers. Now on to destroyers is another ship that I don't own. This would be the Anshan. This is the Pan-Asian destroyer that you can buy usually in the premium shop. I'm not sure if it's available at the moment, but it's basically a Tier 6 Gremyachki. And I see it as a very strong ship. It's both a gunboat and it's a torpedo boat because it has those 8-kilometer torpedoes that it can stealth fire from. Its detection range is the same as the Gremyotchki with 7.5 kilometers, so you have a decent stealth torp range. Its guns, once again, are very good. It's a very good gunboat, very strong. It has a lot of HP compared to other destroyers at the tier. And its detection range isn't that... It's not amazing if you're trying to cap. It does have that 7 to 7.5 kilometer detection range, but it's enough to where you can cap if a cruiser's trying to come at you, and it's enough to hunt other destroyers with. So all around, it's not a bad ship. It's very scary to see, and if you're in another destroyer at that tier, and I think it's probably your best choice, with the Farragut being the second best choice. I don't really see the Mutsuki being a strong ship to use at that tier during the season, at least. Moving on to the carriers, this probably won't come to us as a surprise to many players, but I actually suggest the Ryujo over the Independents at that tier. Both are fairly good characters, or not characters, they're both fairly good carriers at the tier, but I think the Ryujo just has stronger loadouts. It doesn't sacrifice a fighter to have a full strike loadout. It keeps that fighter through all its loadouts, actually. And it doesn't have to sacrifice torpedoes, I do believe, to go with a fighter loadout. So it's a very strong carrier. It can really outtrade an Independence if it goes fighter loadout. And it's definitely a better ship overall in my opinion, with the faster launch times and a little bit more ships on its deck. Or not, what the hell did I just say? A little bit more planes on its deck compared to the Independence, so it can afford to lose a couple more. Now to turn the page, I'd like to address Tier 8. This is where I'm going to actually have more of a decisive pick. I'm not going to say, oh, you could choose this one, but this one could work too. Tier 8 is what I have played this season. I didn't play Tier 6 because I was a high enough rank last season that I started at 15. Now for the Tier 8 picks, above rank 15 I should say, for battleships, I would choose the Bismarck. Now, this is a new ship that just came out. It's in the new German battleship line, and it is a monster in my opinion. Same guns as the Tirpitz. Basically, a lot of the same characteristics as the Tirpitz, but it does not have the torpedoes for that close range burst. It has 10.6 kilometers secondaries when it is built for a secondary build, basically. When it's kitted out just for its secondaries and for nothing else. They are monsters. They will tear another ship apart, and it's just like having a destroyer shooting at you off the side of the ship. And it's really strong in that aspect. It has good penetration on the main guns to back that up. They're not extremely accurate. You might get 1 or 2 hits if you're launching at long range, but that doesn't matter if you're trying to brawl like this ship is made for. Its armor does not hold up at long range. At close range, when it's angled, it has amazing armor unless a gun is overmatching it. But as soon as you get at long range where it can start penetrating through your deck, the Bismarck armor starts to fade, in my opinion. You'll start taking bigger penetrations through the top of your ship. But when you do brawl, you get those punchy guns that get more accurate as you get close, and then you have the secondaries backing you up. Now, it's a very flexible ship too. It has hydroacoustic search, also known as sonar, for spotting destroyers, torpedoes, and it lasts quite a while, so it's actually quite useful when you're trying to advance on a cap position that is either has a cloaked destroyer in it or might have a destroyer that's launching torpedoes at your battle group. The AA is not amazing. It won't stop a CV strike, but it might shoot down a couple planes and save you some health points. It's definitely one of the weak points of the ship if you do go for a secondary build. Its turn time is also extremely long, so if you get caught in a bad situation and you're being focused by a couple battleships, or you have a destroyer torpedo spread coming in off your side, you're definitely going to take some damage if you have to turn, because it has a massive turn rate. Or not a turn rate, but a massive turn radius. Its rudder shifts is actually pretty decent. And to top that all off, you don't have great torpedo protection, as we have seen with the rest of the German battleship line. You will take a lot of damage from destroyers and enemy carriers. So definitely have to watch out for the torpedoes. Have that hydroacoustic search up if you're going to start pushing somewhere. And try to avoid all the torpedoes you can, because that's going to be a huge source of damage for you. So after battleships, I'd like to go to the cruisers. Now, what do I see as the best cruiser for Tier 8? Unsurprisingly, I am going to go to the Russian line again with the Mikhail Kutuzov. This ship, with all the smoke that it can produce, as you see a lot of destroyers covering the friendly team with their smoke at high tier, is a monster. It will sit in smoke or at 19 kilometers and absolutely pound your battleships with high explosive fire, light them on fire 500,000 times, and burn them straight to the ground. I know a guy who's made rank 1, who I was definitely afraid of in his Mikhail Kutuzov, because he would absolutely trash either my battleships, or if he was on my team, he'd trash my enemy's battleships. He was a scary player in that Mikhail Kutuzov. And it's a very scary ship with its long range, high rate of fire. It has great arcing guns. You can shoot over islands. The fire chance on the high explosive shells is very high for its rate of fire. And it's, once again, it's very flexible. It has 8-kilometer torpedoes, 1 launcher on each side, that can deal massive damage if they get too close. And the big selling point for this ship is the smoke that it has. If you get in a situation where you're not able to hide behind an island, but you can sit out and pop smoke and pound away at an enemy battleship, it is amazing for that. It can provide support, it can cloak other ships on its team, and then it can just sit in that smoke and tear away at enemy ships. It's an extremely maneuverable ship too. It has a great turning radius, it's very fast. The downside would be its weak armor. It cannot really take a hit from battleships or even cruisers if they catch it broadside. It will get eaten to shreds, as it is only a light cruiser. And it also has a very large detection range, which doesn't help it very much, but it's made up for by the smoke. But once again, it's very flexible. It can support your team, whether it's with the smoke or with its very, very, very good anti-aircraft defenses. Its anti-aircraft defenses are almost on the same level as the Des Moines class cruiser, which is a tier 10 American cruiser. So it's a very, very supportive ship if it can be used in the right position and doesn't get one shot by a battleship. Onto the destroyers at tier 8, I would say probably the Benson or the Lo Yang would be your best choices if you're going to take a destroyer into that tier. Now, I have seen Fubukis and Tashkents do well, Fubukis more than Tashkents, but overall, Bensons and Lo Yang seem to be the primary choice. They have very high rate of fire for gunboats, and they're very, very stealthy. They can sneak up close range with other destroyers and get to where their gun's arc is not going to bother them. The gun arc being the downside of the American destroyers, as it's extremely high. And it's also a ship that can stealth torpedo. It has decent range torpedoes. I believe they're 10.6 kilometer torpedoes, if I'm not wrong. But it has a very large stealth range to where it can fire those torpedoes and not be detected. So all in all, it's a very, very good ship. It can mount defensive fire if it needs to help their team. The Lo Yang actually has sonar. It's short ranged. I believe it's like 3.6 kilometers, but it's still going to help you if you have to find another destroyer in smoke, or if you're worried about torpedoes hitting you. The only real downsides I could see to using a Benson or the Lo Yang would be the arc of the shells or the slow speed of the torpedoes. Those torpedoes are going to crawl to the targets. It's going to leave a lot of time for those targets to get out of the way of those torpedoes, though, as we all know, a lot of players like to travel in straight lines. Same goes for the guns. They have a very high arc to them, so it'll take a while for the guns to actually reach their target and do the itty-bitty destroyer damage that the guns usually do. But all in all, those would be the two destroyers that I'd suggest at tier 8. Now for the carriers, it was kind of a toss-up for me. I'm not a huge carrier driver, as I've probably pointed out before, and I definitely haven't taken my carriers into ranked because I'd be a major liability to my team. But overall, from what I've seen do better in ranked would be the Shokaku. Now, Lexingtons have that very powerful strike loadout, and they have that very powerful anti-aircraft, or the air superiority loadout, and it's a very, if it's built for it, has a lot of anti-aircraft on its ship to defend against carrier sniping. But it's not as strong as the Shokaku in either of its configurations, because when it does go strike, it gives up that fighter, which leaves it very vulnerable to any configuration that the Shokaku can run. Because the Shokaku keeps the fighter, it can disrupt the Lexington strikes wherever it wants, basically. Now, as per saying it has the stronger loadouts, that would be the main selling point, but it also has more planes for spotting and harassing, which it's a lot more productive than a lot of people give it credit for. Even if those planes don't have bombs or anything, they can still spot enemy destroyers for friendly destroyers to shoot at, and they can harass enemy ships, whether it's just round the clock bombing them or sending the planes over and making them worry. And it's really a lot stronger than people give it credit for. And the last selling point that I'd like to give the Shokaku is its ability to be stealthed. Now, the Lexington has a massive range to which it can be detected, and that's a really painful point of playing that in ranked, because you want to stay with the fleet and not get caught out by the enemy destroyers, but you just can't be close because you'll be detected in one shot by the battleships, and it hurts the Lexington so bad when it's trying to get in there and aid the enemy team with short launch times and short ship-to-ship travel times for its planes. And it really hurts the Lexington in this regard. But the Shokaku can be stealthy, it can get closer to the enemy fleet can stay closer to the friendly fleet than the Lexington can, and I think this is a really strong position for the Shokaku. So I hope you guys enjoyed or learned something from my little overview of what I think are the best ships for this season of ranked. Try it out, see how you do, let me know. If you have your own opinions, let me know that too. And hope you guys have a great time in ranked, and good luck to you.